All right. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Excited to be with you on this Monday following the Dr. King holiday yesterday. Hope everybody had a fantastic long holiday weekend. I see you coming on in. Drop in the comments where you're joining us from. Glad you are here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm excited about today's topic. So timely. Glad to be able to connect with you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Glad to see you here. Yeah, just drop in the comment where you're joining us from. Glad you're here. Talking about missing these church documents. Got to get them together. I'm gonna share with you my proprietary legal audit checklist, right? So you can ensure that you reduce your church's risks. So we want to make sure that we are getting things together. You know, it's the beginning of the year. That's always a great time to get things in order, right? One of the things that, thanks for the hearts already. One of the things that people always want to focus on at the beginning of the year is, from a personal standpoint, is health, right? And so we're want to make sure that we also focus on church health and finances. Those are the two big things, right, that people generally talk about at the beginning of the year. So we care about church health, your church finances, and what we're talking about today is going to be helpful. So I have a question. For you. So again, my name is Erika Cole. I'm a church attorney. If you are a pastor, if you're a board member, an executive pastor, an administrator, a finance leader, right? If you're in any of those church leadership roles, today is for you. You're in the right place. We're talking about a simple question that creates big problems. I see it all the time, literally all the time, right? So here's a question. Ready? If somebody asked you today, listen, if you can provide to me your church's key legal and financial documents, we'll give you $25,000, right? If you got that question, how many of your churches could say, yep, got it all right here. It's all together. Bam. Not many. I'd venture to say probably not even most. And that's really what we want to talk about. So if somebody asked you today, if you can't answer yes emphatically, and I'm going to go over with you, I'm going to give you my legal audit checklist. So you will have this and you'll be able to go through this list. So we'll talk about what the documents need to look like. But if somebody asked you for your key legal and financial documents and said, if you can give them to me in 10 minutes, you got $25,000. Could you do it? Most of the time, the answer is no, unfortunately. So we're talking about bylaws, board minutes, salient policies, right? All these things that you want to have in one place. I want to help you with that. So if the answer is, I'm not sure, don't feel bad. You're in good company. Most churches are in the same situation. They're not there yet. Most churches are nonprofits, but this is exactly where church compliance, church governance, church risk management, right? It either gets strong or it gets exposed. We are seeing lots of these issues with unfortunate exposures in the church. You all know my story, right? I hope you do. Hi, Reverend Anthony. I was raised in the church. I always say, like, my mom was my Sunday school teacher. My dad was the head trustee of our church. I also knew at a very young age that I wanted to be an attorney. I was like 10 or 11 years old, and I knew that I wanted to be an attorney, but God knew that I was meant to be the church attorney. This is the work that I've done for over 2 decades. I love the church. I love his people, and I love that I get to help by sharing this critical legal information with churches and faith-based organizations. Okay. So in the next, minutes that we have together, I'm going to walk you through what is the church attorney legal audit system document checklist. This is a checklist that is proven. It has proven the test of time. And I promise you, right? I don't make a lot of promises, but I promise you, if you pull these documents together for your church, you are going to put yourself in a wonderful circumstance of reducing legal and financial issues. Promise. Okay, so hi, Cavell. Glad that you're here. Cavell can echo this. He also does some great work. So the documents that churches need to gather, to organize, and keep updated so that they can reduce risk, protect leaders, because this is a protection for church volunteers as well as church leaders. So we want to make sure that the church is secure. We know that we are living through some wild times, right? Wild times, and we want to be able to do our part as best we can to protect the church, to protect church leaders, and to operate with confidence, right? So those things that I said at the beginning of the year that most leaders are wanting to do, most people are wanting to do, right? They're focused on wellness and they're focused on money, especially at this time of the year. And so we want to really highlight wellness for the church, for church leaders, and that financial component. All right. So say hello in the chat. Tell me your role, whether you are a pastor, whether you're a board member, you're a finance team member, whatever that is. I would love to see that. And my team is here as well. And we're also going to invite you, you'll see it in the chat, to sign up for our free webinar where I'm going to be able to get more into this, because it's an hour-long webinar that's coming up soon. So you'll have the registration there, and you'll also be able to download this checklist, but I'm going to share it a little bit with you. So if you want to get a copy of this checklist that I'm going to be sharing with you. Okay. Hi, Mertice. I hope I said that right. You're a finance team member, David Smith. Okay. Hi. Good to see you, David. I think he's in the membership as well. He's a executive pastor. Okay. And Robert, you're an assistant pastor. Glad that you're here. Administrator finance. Okay. Hi, Karen. And financial secretary, office manager, Cindy. Yeah, this is for you all. I'm glad that you're here, because every single one of you. Hi, Rhonda. Financial secretary. Okay. Nyla is a law student. Welcome. Okay. Reach out to us, Nyla. I love that. Hi, Shakeen. Good to see you, church administrator and trustee. Okay, Reverend Anthony, senior pastor, executive director. This is for you all. So I'm so glad that you're showing up. Hi, Pastor Sydney. Good to see you. Pastor and Linda. Hi, Linda. She's also in the Faithful Foundations membership, I believe. Overseer. Okay. Co-founder and executive pastor, Sherelle Bennett. Thanks. I'm glad that you all are here. Hi, Sister Ruth. That's my mom. Good to see you. And she's also a church leader. Glad that you all are here. So, all right, let me just jump in here, because if you want this checklist, again, sign up for the free webinar. If my team will just drop that link again in the chat, that would be awesome. And I'm also going to do something I haven't done before. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see this checklist for yourself. Let's see. Look at that. You see the checklist? Can you just say yes in the chat so I'll know that everybody can see it? So I'm showing you the checklist, but you can get this for yourself. When you sign up for the webinar, you'll just get an email or however my team set up so that you get the document. Okay, yes. Thank you so much, Pastor Bradley. Okay, great. We're going to walk through this checklist. I know it may be a bit difficult. I don't know how well you can see it. Hopefully you can see it pretty clear. Okay, thanks. I'm seeing yes in the chat. Great. So listen, let me just tell you why I created this. You heard my question at the beginning, right? I asked, if someone said, if you can provide to me your church documents, right, I will give you $25,000. And I know that might sound far-fetched, but it's not. I've actually been in circumstances where we know that all of the giving that's done, the greatest level of giving, I know, is to the church. So out of all the kinds of nonprofits that there are, tax-exempt organizations, churches are at the top. So I know that you may or may not feel that your church is receiving all the gifts that it wants to, but I feel like a part of it is us putting ourselves in positions to receive. So I just want you to put receive in the comments. If you want to position your church, your organization to receive, that's awesome. I love it. Cavell says, this was the catalyst that really helped me communicate with our board about having these things in order. Amen. Cavell is with the Faithful Foundations membership as well. So love that, Cavell, going into you. Yes. Paul Carr says receive. I see receive. Yes. church member. Glad you here. Receive. Amen. So churches don't usually get in trouble because they're trying to do something wrong. That's been my experience. Most of the time, churches will say, we want to do the right thing, right? And what I say is the first step in doing the right thing is wanting to do the right thing, right? So I know that you all want to do the right thing. That's what integrity is, right? Integrity is wanting to do the right thing, even if nobody sees, if nobody knows, if nobody applauds you for it, you still want to do the right thing. We want to do the right thing because we want to honor God, right? So churches don't usually get in trouble because they're trying to do something wrong. They get in trouble because they can't prove what was decided. They can't show that they followed their own policies. They can't show proper financial controls. Just in the past week, we have seen, I want to say just in the past same number of days, like 4 major church leaders, right? Major church leaders, one of whom, Karn, right? You've heard that name, was he pled guilty in not properly managing the finances of himself and the church. I mean, we're talking about prison time, right? We want your church to have a prison ministry, but from the outside, right? We don't want you to be inside the prison. We want you to be outside. So this is really critical information, and I just want us to receive it, right? So when churches rely on the fact that we've always done it this way, or they often get in trouble because they are missing the documentation that protects leadership decisions. I don't want that to be you. Okay. So when a church hits a problem, when there's a dispute, when there's a building issue, an IRS question, a bank signature dispute, right? A leadership transition, the first thing that's asked, the first thing that anyone asks is, do you have the documentation? Do you have the documents? Do you have the paperwork, right? So today I'm going to give you a practical roadmap, the things that you need in place. So first of all, let me just define the church legal audit. So you know that I am Erika Cole, the church attorney, right? My whole legal career, like my whole passion is serving churches on the legal side so that they have their legal house in order. So when I say a church legal audit, I'm not talking about an IRS audit. Really, we're talking about preventing an IRS audit, God willing. I'm talking about the proactive legal and compliance review that I encourage every church to have in place, every church to do, right? So it's a legal and compliance review of the church's key areas, right? So this is covering things like governance documents, your tax and regulatory compliance, risk management issues. That's what we're talking about. So let me just walk you through this checklist. So this is the kind of thing when I, again, ask that question, if you have all of your salient documents in one place, if somebody said, we have a heart to donate $25,000 to your church, but we need to know that your legal documents are in order. This is what you'd want to make sure that you could show. So number one on that, you see that checkbox? Number one, I want you to make sure that you have your articles of incorporation. Some states call that an articles of organization. And you should be able to identify your date of incorporation or your date of formation. That's a basic document, right? This is the document that is generally filed with the state, and it's filed with the Secretary of State where your church is located. Okay. Now, I will say not every church has made the decision to incorporate. I won't get into that on this live. I think in general, it is a best practice for churches to incorporate, just like it is a best practice from a business standpoint to separate your individual self from your business. The business is considered a legal person. A church, once it's formed, it's considered a legal entity unto itself. Just highly recommended to operate in that way. So you want to make sure you have your articles of incorporation. That is that legal document that creates the life of the church, okay, from a legal standpoint. Now, then you also, the next checkbox there is any articles of amendment. You want to have those in place. Sometimes there may be an amendment that changes the name of the church, right? Your church was initially named such and such and such and such Baptist Church Assembly or whatever it was. And then maybe you've changed the name to Life-Giving Church or Greater Something Church, right? Sometimes there's a name change. That is something that generally requires an amendment, and you want to make sure that you have a copy of those amendments. And I'm going to get more into in the webinar. Again, the link is there to sign up for the webinar. I'll be able to get into more details, but these are things that you want to have in place. Next, you've got to have your bylaws. If there is an area where churches get into so much trouble, it is this area of bylaws. A lot of times bylaws have been written. I always say that 1987 may have been a great year, but it shouldn't have been the last year that you have reviewed your bylaws, right? Bylaws are something that you do want to make sure it's your governing document. It's your internal governing document. What I have often found is that when churches create bylaws, sometimes they haven't reviewed them in years and years and years. And a lot of times what the bylaws say the church is doing and what is actually happening are two different things. And that can create major legal problems. But at a minimum, can you put your hands on your bylaws? I've also seen situations where a lot of these critical documents are at someone's house. Can you just don't say it, I'm not saying that it's you, but have you heard of that before, right? Where people or somebody from the board, the church secretary, right? Some older member has had these documents kept in their home. I've had situations where someone has passed away and then the church is trying to access its documents and it can't. I've had situations where there is a conflict within the church, right? There's some sort of church split. Maybe there's a succession that didn't go well, and then one faction goes this way and one faction goes the other, and nobody wants to share the actual documents with each other. It can be an issue. You got to be able to have these things in a secure way and maintain them appropriately. But 3 on the list is your bylaws. Next on the list is your IRS confirmation of EIN. The EIN stands for employer and ID number. So it's also known as a taxpayer ID number or TIN, right? This is the information that is given. Yes. Okay, I'll get to that question. What do we do if we want to update the bylaws? I'll get to that. And Cavell says, yes, bylaws and church checkbooks kept in the home. Yes, you've seen this. It's not good. And I just want to sound the alarm because I don't think this is a thing that gets discussed. But I'm telling you what I see, what I know, and what can cause issues. And this is the time to make sure you get these things together. So when we talk about the IRS confirmation of EIN, that is the letter that your church would have received when it applied for an employer identification number with the Internal Revenue Service. So we know that the EIN is like your social security number for an individual, right? It is the identification number for the church, or more specifically, for the legal entity established by the church. So it's really critical that you can prove this is your EIN. You won't believe, or maybe you will, the number of times I have gone to the Internal Revenue Service's information site and found that the EIN that the church is using is no longer active. Literally, you can't, or the EIN that the church has been using is not actually their correct EIN number, right? Somebody from years ago transposed the number and it's been an issue, all kinds of things. That's why you want to make sure that you keep your confirmation letter. Again, and we can talk about what to do if you don't have these things. I'll get more into that into the webinar, but your IRS confirmation of EIN, that's a critical part of the documentation you want to have on hand and a part of your document checklist. Next is the IRS letter of determination confirming tax exempt status. Now, again, while churches are presumed to be tax exempt, they are the only type of nonprofit presumed to be tax exempt. You can only demonstrate your exempt status if you have that IRS letter of determination. That's the letter that, again, if your church applied for tax exempt status and was approved, then you should have received a letter from the IRS indicating that approval. I've completed, I think I can definitely hundreds, and I feel like thousands of tax exempt applications, gratefully with a 100% success rate. But the tax exempt application is a lengthy process, but at the end of that process, if it's done correctly, the church should have received a letter of determination confirming the tax exempt status. You've got to keep a copy of that letter. Pretty much anytime you would want to apply for a grant, or even apply for other exemptions like property tax exemption, sales tax exemption, generally speaking, they're wanting to have proof of this, of your IRS tax exempt status. So that's why you want to make sure you keep that letter on hand. Also, the IRS says that if anyone requests to see that IRS letter of determination, you need to provide it. You can't provide it if you don't have it, okay? Related to that, a copy of the Form 1023, application for recognition of exemption. If you've applied for tax exempt status, that's the document that you would have submitted to the IRS. You need to keep a hard copy of that. The next thing, and I get questions on this sometimes, is I say copies of the most recent personal property returns. Well, every or the annual report, whatever your state calls it, generally speaking, every state has rules about every organization or legal entity formed in that state applying, making usually an annual filing with the state. So you want to keep a copy of those annual filings. District of Columbia is biannual filings, but however frequently your state requires, you want to make sure that you keep those documents, at least the most 3 recent ones. Next, make sure that you have a roster with your board of directors or trustees. This can be such a big issue. And I was just speaking with someone about this recently because they have an opportunity. I know I started off this whole live asking if somebody was going to give you a bunch of money and said you needed to be able to share, make sure that you have these documents in place. Could you do it? Right? Literally, this is a circumstance where an organization had an opportunity to receive a sum, but we needed to be able to show who the board is, right? Because a lot of times there's board actions that are necessary in order to receive funds or in order to make certain decisions related to those things. And you can't do that if you're not clear about the current board or the current trustees, right? So you want to have their names, their roles, who is the secretary, who is the president, right? Because a lot of times the signatories that are required depend on these things. Now we want to also have the names of any persons on the board who are related either by blood or by marriage. Why? Because this gets into the issue of possible conflicts of interest. And we want to be able to identify those things sooner rather than later. Again, I'll get more into that when we have the webinar. If you haven't signed up, please make sure you do so. It's a free webinar that's coming up in just a couple of weeks, and I would love to see you there and hopefully, and I'll be getting deeper into some of these things. I'll try to answer as many of the questions here, but I'll set aside Q&A specifically for the upcoming webinar. A copy of the registration for any registered trade names. So I want to make sure that, and also a registration of any trademarks. So a trademark means it's registered with United States Patent and Trademark Office, like my name, the church attorney, is registered. That's why you see that circle with an R in it. That means it's a registered mark. If your church has any marks or if it has a trade name, right? So you may be ABC Church, but maybe for ease, you're called just A Church. Not a great example, but you get my point, right? So anytime that you have a trade name that should be registered with the state, any trademarks, they're federally registered. And finally, if this was a huge issue that created so much confusion last year and the year before, but there's this whole Corporate Transparency Act, right, that came out. And I said, we want to make sure that you meet with your accountants regarding whether you're required to file. Generally speaking, churches were exempted, but there may be other church-run organizations like schools or childcare centers or anything like that. You just want to make sure that you're clear. It seems to me now that the Corporate Transparency Act has become pretty null. So hopefully that's not an issue that we'll have to address. So I have covered all of the items on the checklist. Again, Governance documents are what protects the church when there's any internal conflicts, when there's a leadership transition, any bank disputes, or any kind of questions around what your status is, right, from a legal perspective. So you want to make sure that you have all these things in place. And this is the time to do it, right? We always love this time, the beginning of the year. We can really look to our organization, look to our structure, make sure that we have things in place. So I'm also making sure that you know that you can get this checklist. You can download it yourself. When you sign up for the webinar, you'll get an email from our office, or you'll get notification immediately from our office that will allow you to download the document checklist. All right, I'm going to try to get to some of your questions. Easy BV or B, easy, I don't know, EASEVBEE. What do we do if we want to update the bylaws? I will say that I did do a whole webinar on that topic as well. And so maybe if my team can drop that resource to you, I would make sure that you take advantage of that. But the short version is, take a look at what your bylaws say. Your bylaws should give you direction about how to update the bylaws. You also want to look to the laws in your jurisdiction. And you want to make sure that you know who has the authority to make these changes, because bylaws, again, it's a huge area, and it's a place where unfortunately churches can get in trouble. Next, Karen Queen says, what is the purpose for knowing the relationship of the board members? I think I did describe that. The IRS essentially says that a majority of the persons on the board should not be related by blood or by marriage. So related by blood, i.e. mother, father, sister, brother, that kind of thing. Related by marriage, spouse. So that gets to the area of conflicts, and we want to make sure that as a part of the conflicts of interest policy, we would address that. So that's the purpose. Hi, Deidre Williams, trustee. Please repeat how we can register for the webinar you mentioned. Yeah, sure. My team should just drop the link again. It should be somewhere I know that they've dropped it earlier, but sometimes it moves down. So you can scroll up and see that, or hopefully my team can drop it again in the comment area. Hi, Nagil from Hollis, Oklahoma. Glad that you're here. Yeah, if you're joining us on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe. I see that some of you are here from Facebook, a lot of you here from YouTube, some of you are on here from LinkedIn. Glad for all of you to be here. Yeah, my team just dropped it again in YouTube, the link to register. The question, board members, but not employees. Okay, I think you're asking about the conflicts of interest. So the conflicts of interest policy should address employees as well. But remember, the conflicts of interest policy is specifically for the board, because presumably employees don't have the same level of access to information and governance of the organization. So that's why it's for the board. So listen, I look forward to being able to get a bit more in the weeds and taking more of your questions at the upcoming webinar. So make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure that you register for the webinar. It's going to be a great time. These are discussions that we've got to have as a church. We want to make sure that we are positioning ourselves to honor God, to do the work, but that we also, as the Bible says, occupy until he comes, right? Let's do what we need to do to operate in integrity, to be able to serve the communities that God has called us to until he comes. All right. Love you all. Thank you so much for joining me here. And I look forward to catching up with you again in the webinar. Daryl Thornton says, are bylaws typically filed through your state or county? Bylaws are adopted. It's an internal document. They're generally not filed at all, which is why it can be particularly tricky. A lot of times bylaws get lost because, unlike the articles, which are filed with the Secretary of State, bylaws, thank you so much, are internal and are not required generally to be filed with the state. They are a part of your application for tax exempt status, but they're not a filed document. So thank you for that question. Got some other questions. Diedrich says, if a church has other names they use, should they register it as a trademark, trade name, or service mark? Yeah, that can be an issue. Yeah, that's a part of what I cover too in the legal audit system. And the trademark versus trade name is very different. So the trade name is really attached to your name with the Secretary of State. So I would generally say that's a great place to start. So I would certainly start there if you're actively using it, but you also have to do your research, right? Because you don't want to register a name that is somebody else's name, right? Because then you're really creating a new issue for yourself. So you want to make sure that you get that. Where can we get the document checklist on the screen? Yeah, when you register for the webinar, you'll automatically get the document checklist. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate it. Glad to be of service. Cavell says, thank you for all you do, Rick. You're so welcome. Jarrell says, thank you for your kingdom work. It's truly my pleasure. I'm grateful to be able to serve you all. Love you all again, and look forward to seeing you in the webinar. Blessings. Bye-bye.